Instead of a regular pie crust, I'm making a pecan shortbread crust. So I'm just using store-bought pecan cookies. I'll add a couple of tablespoons of sugar. Since it's a lemon meringue pie, I'll throw a little lemon zest into the crust. And I'll pulse this until everything's broken up. Pretty much any cookie can be made into a pie crust. It's just a matter of will. That looks good. These pecan cookies are pretty moist by nature, but I'm gonna drizzle in a little bit of melted butter just to help them come together. And I wanna pulse it so the butter totally mixes in with the crumbs. Okay, all of them go into a pie pan. I'll just use my trusty rusty fingers to press this into the pan. Making desserts for Chuck is truly one of the big joys in my life. I remember the first time I took him a lemon meringue pie. It was in my first year of marriage. I really don't think that pie was all that great looking back. I've gotten a lot better in my cooking skills since then. One more little press. Now this is gonna go into a 350-degree oven just for about 8 to 10 minutes until it's set. And while it goes, I'm gonna make the lemon curd for the filling. I'll start with 1 1/4 cup of sugar. Just goes into a saucepan. I'm making a mess, but I have to be me. Can't help it sometimes. I'll pour in 4 egg yolks, and then I'll turn on the heat and whisk this together. Now they're all mixed, so I'm gonna pour in some lemon juice. Freshly squeezed, about 1/3 cup. Now I just need to let this heat up before I move forward with it. I have a mixture of cornstarch and water, just a simple cornstarch slurry. I just want to make sure it's all stirred together. And you want to pour this in right when it's almost to the boiling stage. Now I need to stir it until it's really, really thick. Okay, the crust is out of the oven. The lemon curd is just about done, so I'm starting on the meringue. I've been whipping some egg whites, and I have some cream of tartar. And I'll drop in 1/4 teaspoon. And then this needs to keep going until the whites are really stiff. To finish off the curd, oh boy, it is so thick and beautiful. I'm gonna drop in 2 tablespoons of butter. And I'll turn off the heat and I'll stir it in. The butter's just gonna give it a great silkiness and extra richness. Now back to the egg whites. I have a mixture of sugar and cornstarch, and I'll just sprinkle it in super slowly. I'll let it go for a few more seconds. Oh wow, looks like a fluffy white cloud in there, and that means the meringue is ready. I'm gonna put the curd into the crust. This is gonna be a lovely sight. The curd is fully cooked at this stage, so it's not gonna need to finish off in the oven. The oven is basically for the meringue. Oh, that looks great, and the crust is gonna be magical. I'll grab the egg whites. And the only secret to this is just to get it all on in whatever design you want. Just plop it really gently. You don't have to be too careful at this stage because the air is already incorporated. Get as much of this on as possible. Such a beautiful summery pie. Just to make it a little easier on myself, I'm gonna use a dinner knife to spread this out. It just has a little more precision than a big spatula. And the only secret is you wanna get it out to the edge and you wanna cover the crust. You want the meringue to seal everything in. And once you got it on the edge, you can grab a little spatula and start kind of having fun with the surface. You want it to have lots of texture, so in the oven it gets little brown sections, so just have fun with it. Just act like you're playing in your food. Okay, I think that's about as artistic as I'm gonna get today. This is gonna go into a 350-degree oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. Brought you a pie.
I mean, Grammy's trying to wean me from sweets, man. I'm starving to death.
Well, that's why you have daughters-in-law.
I mean, come on in. Thank you.
Lemon icebox pie. The crust for the pie, graham crackers to start with, sugar, melted butter. Pour the crumbs into a pie pan, press it, bake the crust. I need to make the filling cold cream, powdered sugar, vanilla, let the cream whip, and now I'm gonna make the lemon filling. Start with a jar of lemon curd, sweetened condensed milk, cream cheese. Keep mixing it up until you don't see any more lumps in it. Add a little bit of the whipped cream to the lemon filling, then to this pie crust, filled right up to the edge. I'm covering the rim of the crust in the whipped cream. Put the pie into the freezer for a couple of hours. I'll top the pie with a mix of blackberries and raspberries, then a sprig of mint and a dusting of powdered sugar, and that is one awesome pie. I call this Lad's chocolate pie because I make it for Lad all the time. He absolutely loves it, and I make it for him all the time, not just because he loves it, but because it is so easy to make. It takes no time at all. Now, I'll start with the filling for the pie, which is 1.5 cups of sugar and 1/4 cup of cornstarch. That helps it thicken up. And then just 1/4 teaspoon of salt, not too much. Now, I'll stir this together. I've learned the hard way that when you stir cornstarch with anything else, you have to be really gentle or you'll have this big white cloud in front of you. One of the many lessons I've learned during my years in the kitchen. Now, for the liquid, I'll measure 3 cups of whole milk. So I'll just pour the milk right on in the saucepan. Now I have 4 egg yolks, and I'll just give them a little whisk, and those go right on in. Nothing complicated about this at all. Now I'll turn on the heat, and the filling just needs to cook for a few minutes. I'll stir to get it all combined. Okay, now while the filling starts to cook and thicken up, I'll chop up some chocolate. Now you can use lots of different varieties of chocolate for chocolate pie. This is bittersweet chocolate, and it just results in the perfect chocolate balance. It's not too sweet, it's not too strong, it's just perfect. You can sub in some semi-sweet chocolate if you like things to be a little bit sweeter. Now, before I finish chopping, I'm just gonna give this another stir. You need to babysit this a little bit while it heats up. Don't walk away or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Okay, it's starting to heat up. Get the rest of the chocolate ready so it can go right in. Okay, that's just the right amount of chocolate. This won't be long. Now, when it starts to thicken, it happens really fast. Just after it boils, it's this thick, nice pudding consistency. It looks luscious. Now, I turn the heat off and I'll add the chocolate. It just all goes in. The filling is so hot, it'll start melting almost instantly. And then I add just a splash of vanilla extract, not too much. And then just to give it some last minute silkiness and richness, 2 tablespoons of butter. And then, oh, it's such a beautiful sight when you stir all this together. The chocolate distributes in all that luscious pudding. The great thing about this is you don't even need a crust. You can just eat pudding. You can serve it warm or you can chill it in little cups. Sometimes if my crust is too small and I have a little filling left over, I'll fill little cups. The kids like to squirt whipped cream on top and have a snack. All right, it looks absolutely perfect. Now I've just got to get it into the crust. I'm using a store-bought frozen crust. I just poked it with a fork, baked it until it was golden, and then the filling just goes right in. There is no more beautiful sight than that. Now, I don't get too worked up about getting all this filling out of the pan, because that'll give me a little snack later. Perfect. Now, the pie needs to go into the fridge to chill for several hours. So here's Lad's and here's mine. I know which one I prefer. It is time to sweeten things up in here. I'm gonna make, get ready, a King of the Ranch ice cream pie. This is basically just the best ice cream pie you could ever imagine. It's got chocolate, it's got caramel, it's got nuts. It is out of this world good. So I'm making it pretty easy. I started with a store-bought chocolate crumb crust, and I just added a pint of softened chocolate ice cream, and I'm just gonna smush it and smear it into kind of an even layer. So I'm gonna add some chopped pecans, probably about 2 or 3 tablespoons. On top of the nuts, I'm gonna drizzle in some salted caramel sauce, and then chocolate syrup. Okie doke. That was the first stage, so I'm gonna put this into the freezer. And it needs to freeze for a good hour before you go from there, but I know these kids would never wait that long. So I've got the first stage already done. I'm gonna add a second layer of ice cream, and it is dulce de leche. So then the rest of the pecans go on. Ah, gorgeous. Okay, and then again with the caramel and the chocolate. So now is a good time to decorate it with Alex's favorite food group on earth, canned whipped cream. So I'm just gonna do probably about 12 to 16 little squirts. How cute. Now you stay here, I've got one more thing to grab. I knew I wanted to add cherries to this pie, but if I dug maraschino cherries out of the jar and put them on, it would have all that syrup and it would totally make a mess. So I froze the cherries, and look,
Pretty.
I made 1 too many dollops of whipped cream.
Stick it in the middle.
Yeah,
Too
look.
close. Yeah,
There we
you
go, perfect. OMG. Now believe it or not, this pie isn't ready because you actually need to freeze it again for it to be complete. But the great thing is you can make it ahead of time. Come on around, Alex. Man, are we gonna eat a lot of ice cream pie today? Look at what's
Oh,
inside.
it's delicious.
How cute. I'm making a raspberry cream pie because after the busy day we have, we're all gonna be in the mood for a treat. I've got some chocolate cookies in the food processor, and I'm just gonna pulverize the crumbs until they're really, really fine. Oh, wow. Love that smell. I'll never get tired of that. Now I'm gonna put the crumbs into a bowl. I need to add some butter, but often when I add butter to the food processor, it can sort of get gummy and messy. I want the butter to totally distribute in the crumbs, so I'm just pouring it over. Butter and ground up chocolate cookies. Talk about a treat. Now it goes into the pie pan, and I'll use my trusty hands to just press it in so it's a nice crust. Okay, now I want the crust to set, so I'm gonna put it into a 350-degree oven just for about 3 to 4 minutes. And while it's in there, I'm gonna get to work on the raspberry filling for the pie. I've got some fresh raspberries, and I'll add 3 tablespoons of sugar. This is a creamy and very sweet pie, and it is so delicious. I've made it several times. I'm going in with a fork, and I'm gonna mash the raspberries with the sugar. I wanna get all the big chunks mashed up. Okay, I think these raspberries are about as mashed up as they're gonna get. So I'm gonna get the pie crust out of the oven. I'm already smelling how good it smells. It's not really baking at all, it's just barely setting, so that way the pie won't fall apart when you slice it. I'll let that cool, and I'm gonna finish up with the raspberry filling. It starts with 2 containers of raspberry yogurt, just the regular stuff you get off the shelf in the dairy section of the grocery store, nothing fancy. One of the best ingredients in this pie is a package of vanilla instant pudding. So I'll sprinkle it over the yogurt. I'm gonna let the mixer start whipping this up. It's a little bit temperamental, so I'm gonna let it mix as much as it can. You'll see that the color kind of starts to turn to that vanilla pudding color. Now I wanna give this a scrape because the vanilla pudding mixing with the yogurt creates this strange consistency, and you definitely want it to be totally mixed. Give it one more mix. Okay, now I've got a cup of cold, heavy cream, and I'm gonna drizzle it in. Definitely not a low-fat pie by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, now I'm gonna put the raspberries straight into the cream mixture, and then I'll just gently fold it until it's all combined, because I love the swirled look. This goes into the crust. Look how pretty that is. Oh, the swirls of raspberry. Okay, now I'm gonna put the pie into the freezer for about 20 minutes just to set the surface. And then I'll pull it out, cover it in plastic wrap, put it back into the freezer, and it'll be all ready for dessert tonight. I'm making cherry pie cookie bars. They're basically the most delicious little cobbler treats you've ever tried. They're nice and portable, and I'm gonna start with the dough. It's a 1.25 cups of butter, 1.5 cups of sugar, orange zest. So I'll tap that in. I'll turn the mixer on. Okay, I'm gonna crack in a couple of eggs. I'm also gonna add just a little bit of vanilla, little splash. And that is already creamed together. So I'll turn it off while I put together the dry ingredients. It starts with 4 cups of flour. I love these 2-cup measures. They save so much time. And then 3 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2, 3. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I'll sift this together, and that keeps the cookie dough nice and light. Okay, I'm gonna put about half of the dry mixture into the butter and sugar. This isn't really a cookie dough that you have to baby too much. You can just dump in the dry ingredients, let it start to mix in, and then go in with the rest. It needs just a little bit of liquid, so I'll add 2 tablespoons of milk. And then I'll turn it up and just let it all mix together. Okay, the dough is done. I literally draw a little peace sign. So I have 3 little portions, and then I'll leave one behind and dump the rest in. I don't know how to do it any more clear than that. Then I know I'm not gonna get into trouble at the end when I need the rest of the dough. Okay. Press this down. I'm gonna use canned cherry pie filling. I love this stuff. It is just unabashedly red. I'll use the spatula just to get it all the way out to the edge. All right, now I'm gonna dot the top with little clumps of the rest of the dough. It's gonna bake at 375 degrees for about 35 to 40 minutes till it's nice and golden. I'm just making a glaze with powdered sugar. I'm sifting it to make sure all the lumps are out. So I added the lemon zest, and I'll start with just about 1.5 tablespoons of milk. That looks great. All right, now I just need a spoon, and I'm just gonna drizzle. How cute is that? A boozy pecan pie. Ooh, how good does that sound? So I'm starting with the sticky pecan pie filling, and it's a cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons of packed brown sugar, a healthy pinch of salt, and then I'm gonna take the cup measure and add dark brown corn syrup. You know, I typically use white corn syrup, or light corn syrup it's called, just because I tend to usually have that in my pantry. But there's something about this kind of boozy version of my regular pecan pie. That's about as full as that cup can possibly get. Ready? This is what you call a viscous substance. It's so silky and yummy. Okay, so then I'm gonna add 3 eggs that I already cracked just to make it easy. And a little splash of vanilla, about a teaspoon or so. Normally I would stop mixing here for my regular pecan pie, but I'm gonna take the liberty of adding about 1/4 cup of bourbon. Any more than that, and it would probably affect how the pie bakes. Any less than that, and you would be disappointed. Because if someone tells me I'm going to take a bite of a boozy pecan pie, I most certainly want to taste that booze. So what's cool is I made a homemade crust and I put a little splash of bourbon in the crust itself. I substituted 1 of the tablespoons of cold water in the recipe for my pie crust. So there's gonna be booze everywhere you turn with this pie. And then melted butter, and that really, really sends this filling over the top. So I added the pecans to the crust. You can see this, Alex. And this is how I like to make pecan pie. I like to chop the pecans. There are some people who believe, I'm not gonna name names, that pecan pie should have a topping of pecan halves. Oh, I think that's an enormous mistake. I think you need to have them chopped up because then you wind up with little crispy, wonderful bits of pecan instead of big halves that tear through the filling. I have a whole philosophy and religion about chopping pecans for pecan pie. I'll write a book about it. So I'm gonna lightly cover the pie with foil just to protect the surface so it doesn't get burned while the filling sets. Okay, you ready to get this in the oven?
Yep.
Now, if you're using a smaller pan, you might want to put it on a sheet pan just to catch the drips. But I'm gonna put this into a 350-degree oven. And then in about 50 minutes, I'll take the foil off and let it bake for another probably 20-30 minutes until it's set. But look what I found. I already made one in another pan, and it has totally baked and totally cooled. Okay, so beautiful crispy crust on top. So what really makes this pie extra sensational is that I'm gonna make a boozy whipped cream to go over the top. Emphasis on over the top. So I'm gonna sift just about 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and then I'll add a cup of cold cream, and you guessed it, healthy splash of bourbon. Pecan pie is wonderful because you can actually serve it cold, room temperature, or warm, and it's delicious any way you slice it. Okay, so then I just stir this around, and I'm actually gonna beat the whipped cream by hand, and that way it'll be kind of soft. It'll just sort of be billowy on the slice of pie.
That is so good.
Is it really? Mauricio, get in here and look at this. Look at this boozy pecan pie you're getting ready to eat. And then a little boozy whipped cream for you.
Uh-oh. Thank you. Cheers.
Boozy pecan. Oh. How is it?
Which one are you?
So good.
Chocolate marshmallow pumpkin pie. I'm gonna make some chocolate ganache. I've got some cream that's been simmering away, and I broke up some chocolate pieces. Okay, this is about halfway mixed together, so it's a good time to add just a little bit of vanilla. Okay, this ganache looks beautiful. It's nice and smooth. So I'm gonna pour this all over the top of this pumpkin pie. It just instantly transforms it. I love the combination of pumpkin and chocolate too. I don't do that very often. Okay, I got all the pumpkin covered. So I'm gonna put this into the freezer so the chocolate will set. It won't take long at all. While it sets in the freezer, I'm gonna whip up a creamy marshmallow topping for the pie. It starts with a 7-ounce container of marshmallow cream. It goes into the mixer with 1/4 cup of room temperature butter. I'll just beat them together until they're combined. Next, I'll add 2 cups of heavy cream to another mixer bowl and get it going with the whisk attachment. When it's frothy, I'll gradually add a cup of powdered sugar, whisk it until it forms stiff peaks. Then I'll get the marshmallow mixture into the cream and beat it until it's all incorporated, smooth, and creamy. Okay, the ganache is all set. I'm gonna put the pie right into a ceramic pie dish. I'm gonna get this glorious, creamy marshmallow topping right on the pie. Now, I thought about sprinkling nuts or chocolate candies over the top, but then I remembered these fall lollipops, all different colors, and I thought, how pretty will these be? So I am just gonna stick them all over the pie. No particular order. I love the colors, they're so gorgeous. Whether it's a small dinner or a big holiday gathering, you really can't go wrong with apple pie. Now this one has a crumb topping and it's drizzled with caramel sauce at the end, so it pretty much takes apple pie to a new level. Now I'm making the crust for the pie. I started with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I used a 1.5 cup measure. They're so handy. And I'll add a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and then a teaspoon of salt. This is the pie crust recipe that my friend Sylvia shared with me years and years ago. I added the spices just to give the apple pie a little bit of an edge. I got all that stirred around. Now I'll add 3/4 cup of cold shortening. I just cut it into squares. And then the same amount of cold butter. Now I'll just use a pastry cutter to slowly combine the dry ingredients with the shortening and butter. I got most of the big chunks of shortening and butter broken up. So now I'll add a beaten egg. I didn't overbeat it, I just barely stirred it around with a fork. Now I have a little container of ice water, and I'll just add about 5 tablespoons right over the top. Whenever you're making pie crust, it's important for the ingredients to stay really, really cold. Otherwise, everything falls apart. Now finally, a tablespoon of vinegar. The acid in the vinegar just helps the pie crust stay extra tender. Now I'll just stir it around with a spoon until it just comes together. Now I'll just break the dough in half, and then I'll put each helping into its own plastic bag. I'll just form it into a rough ball. And then after I stick it in the bag, I just flatten it slightly, and that'll make it easier to roll out later. Okay, I'll get the second one in. This pie crust is so good without the spices, but it's particularly delicious with. All right, now I'm gonna stick the pie crust into the freezer. This crust is for a future pie, and this one just needs to chill for about 20 minutes. So when the time's up, all I have to do is get the dough out of the bag and onto a floured surface and start rolling. I just keep going until it's slightly larger than the pie pan. Then I roll it around the rolling pin, lift it onto the pie pan, carefully unroll it, and press it in. Then I tear off the excess dough and tuck the edge under neatly and go around pinching the dough to crimp it. I've just been slicing a bunch of peeled apples. I've got about 6 to 7 cups of apple slices in the bowl. And now I'll add 1/2 cup of sugar. And then to make it a little bit thicker, I'll add 1/4 cup of flour. To combat all that sweetness, it needs a little salt, about 1/4 teaspoon. And then I'll slice a lemon in half, and I'll just squeeze in the juice of 1/2 of it. That is all combined. Now I'll just bring up the beautiful crust, and I'll just pile the apples right in the crust. And when I say pile, I mean pile. I don't believe in having a level apple pie. Okay, just perfect. Now, there are many delicious things about this apple pie, and this crumb topping is one of them. It's butter and flour cut together with some brown sugar, quick oats, which give fabulous texture, and a little salt, all stirred together. Okay, now the crumb topping just gets sprinkled all over the pie. Use my hands. If some of it falls onto the floor, no problem. There's plenty more where that came from. Big pile. Now I'll just use my hands to let it fall into the cracks. Oh my gosh, look at that. Gorgeous. Now the pie goes into a 375-degree oven for about an hour. Then there's another thing to add to the topping before it finishes baking. Half a cup of chopped pecans. Delicious. Okay, back in for 5 more minutes. Well, my house smells heavenly, and that means the pie is ready to come out of the oven. It just looks amazing. Oh, nice and golden, those crunchy nuts on top. The crust looks gorgeous. Now to finish it off and to make it caramel apple pie, I'll just crack open a jar of caramel sauce and I'll just drizzle it all over the pie. My gosh, that looks so good. Todd loves sweets, and this is one seriously sweet pie. He also loves chocolate, peanut butter, so this pie covers all the bases. I also love this pie for all of the aforementioned reasons, but I also love it because it begins with a chocolate cookie crust. I'm gonna melt 4 tablespoons of butter in the saucepan and then grind up the cookies. I have exactly 25 chocolate sandwich cookies. Now, I'm just gonna pulse these up. Don't worry about the creamy filling because it just totally disappears and becomes part of the crumbs. Now, the butter is melted. I'll just drizzle it in. Butter and chocolate cookies. Life doesn't get any better than that. And then I'll just give it a couple of pulses just to moisten up the crumbs. And that is it. Very, very uncomplicated. That's one of the things I love about this pie. Now I will make a big mess as I pour the crumbs into the pie pan. And then the easiest way to get it in is just use your hands, start pressing the center. You want the crust to be pretty packed in there so then later when you slice the pie, the crust will stay together. Another thing I love about this crust is that it's a refrigerator pie and it doesn't have to bake. I'm just gonna stick the crust in a 350-degree oven for about 5 or 7 minutes just to get it set. The filling begins with a cup of creamy peanut butter. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I don't wanna go through the effort of measuring it into the cup and then scraping it out of the cup. So if I get a little more or less, it won't hurt anything. All right, and then I've got an 8-ounce package of softened cream cheese. I'll throw it in there, and then I'll just whip this up for a sec. What a yummy, yummy mixture. Now to this mixture, I'll add 1 1/4 cups of powdered sugar. And the final ingredient, avert your eyes, frozen non-dairy whipped topping. I've been thawing it so it's nice and soft. Of course, you can use regular whipped cream, but it just won't come out with the same consistency as this stuff. Okay, absolutely perfect. All right, now I'm just gonna put this into the cooled crust. I tell you, if you love peanut butter, this is your dessert. The whole kitchen smells like peanut butter right now. And then I'll just spread it around. Look at that, isn't that gorgeous? And that is all there is to it. Now it just needs to sit in the fridge for a couple of hours until it's set.
Wow, that's mine.
That looks good, honey.
Oh my god.
Chocolate peanut butter pie.
That's definitely mine.